Go ahead.
So I'm not on the hook for a couple minutes.
No, you are. Do you need some food?
No.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
All right. Let's call the general session to order and start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Point zero is approval of agenda for October 4th. The motion.
Member Smith motion to approve.
Member Sable seconds.
All right, having a second. Are there any changes? Or
What are you looking at me for?
just giving you a moment, hearing none. All in favor, say yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All opposed, say nay. All right.
For clarification, who made the first
Smith.
Smith. All right, and I'm gonna recess general session. Reconvene general session. I want to reiterate that tonight is a work session, that we are not taking public comment. If that is something that we're planning on doing, so we aren't doing the blue cards. But we are happy to take written comments at any time. After, yes,
Chair Wilkins, I'd like to move that we add an item to our agenda. Probably 6.5, which would be to discuss action related to our park leagues.
okay. I made a motion, is there a second?
Second. Member Dibdall.
Having second, is there any discussion?
Second.
The third.
Hearing none, Tanya, can I take a roll call vote?
Member Richardson,
Yes,
member Smith,
Yes.
member Schmidt,
Yes.
member Brown now,
Yes.
member Dipdahl,
Yes.
member Sable,
yes.
for Wilkins.
Yes. Okay. 6.5,
Chair Wilkins, I move that District 7 Board direct the superintendent to send a letter to the city in consultation with our attorney about the violations of the lease agreement.
all right, is there a second?
Sable, second.
Hearing a second, is there any discussion?
So it sounded like Bill recommended this course of action. Do you agree, Superintendent Sweeney?
I agree.
Tanya, another roll call vote.
This is member Smith. I would just request that it be specific to our lease agreement, referencing section 10.4.
Yes.
You know, and our concerns about nuisance at the parks related to student safety.
Yes, sir.
Member Richardson,
Yes,
member Smith,
Yes.
member Schmidt,
Yes.
member Brown now,
Yes.
member Dipdahl,
Yes.
member Sable,
yes.
member Wilkins.
Yes. All right, 7.0 board special concerns, 7.1 reading resolution. Then do you have-
Yeah, we didn't have the reading resolution in the packet. We have been talking about the reading results across the district for a little while now. One of the things that the board asked me to address when I first started a year ago. We were happy with the increase that we saw last year. We know our work has got a long ways to go. Member Richardson and I have spoken on numerous occasions about the opportunity to put together something in writing that says reading is a priority to us in this district. He sent me some ideas. I've responded with this as a option. And we have Director Zatola here. She has some information available to the board. I think you put it at our desk, didn't you? Right? Of what reading at grade level actually means. So I did want to share with the board that I think this is interesting data. That students that have been in our district more than 3 years. That have a high attendance rate. Right, tend to be very successful on the state reading scores at a better than 60% clip. When we have students that are moving into the district and we're getting them caught up to grade level, we struggle getting all of them to grade level in a single year. I think that's a fair thing to say. So, so this is a resolution that we're presenting to the board tonight.
In your packet, or it wasn't in your packet for Tanya, but what I gave you, is some information about Acadian. So that's the screener that we use, K5. I've used it for many, many, many years. So it's a consistent measure that we have tracked data over time. And maybe more or less than anything you want for nighttime reading, but it does explain what the measures are and what the scores are. There's a chart on, I think, the 3rd page that gives you an indicator of what the scores are to be at quote unquote grade level as measured by Acadians. Another thing that I put in there after the chart are 3 reading passages. I just wanted to give you a clear idea of what that means. It's a 3rd grade passage, a 4th grade passage, and a 5th grade passage. Just as an example of, because it's been a long time since you guys have been 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. So what does it mean? What does it mean to read at 3rd grade, 4th grade, or 5th grade? And so there's some examples in there. And the scores on Acadians are not just about, it's not about reading a list of words or spelling certain words or anything like that. It's a compilation of scores. In fact, it's called a composite score, and it is about decoding. So that's measured by reading a certain amount of words in a certain amount of time. 3rd grade, for example, to be a benchmark would be reading 100 correct words in a minute on a 3rd grade passage. It's also accuracy. So for 3rd grade, it's 97% accuracy. It also includes a short comprehension measure, which is done through 2 ways. It's a retell. So for example, they might read that passage and then the teacher would say, tell us a little, I can't remember, there's actually a script and I haven't done it in a while, but basically tell us a little bit about the passage and they count how many words they say that are on topic that actually are about that passage. And there's a number for that. And then there's another measure called the maze. And that is different than reading this. It would be reading something like this and it's every, I think maybe 7 words. I can't remember exactly. There's a blank and there's 3 choices of words. And the student needs to circle the correct word to fit in the context of that sentence in that passage. So when we say what's it mean to be benchmark at any grade level, it's a compilation of all of those things. And Acadians is the tool that we use to measure that.
That's the tool the state uses?
You know, it's a tool we use as a district and hundreds and hundreds of districts across the nation.
Okay,
Actually,
so,
thousands of districts.
but the
across
information we get from the state, is it based on this?
No, the state, do you mean the state test?
We just got our state benchmark stuff.
So that's the state test, the Oregon State Assessment. That's completely different.
Okay.
The most consistent measure we have is Acadians. Over time, it's the thing that we have used the most consistent.
So for the students who have been in our district 3 years, their Acadian score is the percentage of our students who are at or above benchmark according to Acadians. 60%.
I'd have to do a lot of number crunching for that because what Acadians gives us is that moment in time. So at the end of last year, at the end of the year before, that, you know,
The information you sent me,
was Oregon State assessment.
that was OSAS. And then we went back and looked how many students had been with us for more than 3 years.
And I can do that for Acadians. I just have
Right.
not done that right now.
Yes, so the answer to your question is on OSAS. The students have been, that was more than 60%.
Are we choosing Acadians as opposed to OSATs because we feel like we can affect that more? Are they correlated? Why would we choose one versus the other? Because most people are not gonna see Acadians. They're gonna see our score. That's correct. If somebody's reading an article.
They're gonna see that, right, what's published, we could publish it, but yes, what newspapers publish is the assess score.
I would
That's
say-
comparable across the state.
As a parent, this is very powerful feedback, though. I'm very familiar. Was it called Dibbles before?
Yeah, they
Okay.
just changed the name.
So you sit down with your teacher, especially like in grade school, as a parent, and you're seeing what your child did the beginning of the year, the end of the year, related to these numbers. It's really powerful information
Right.
to keep showing progress.
I should say I prefer Acadians because it gives us instructional information. We can act upon it. We can act upon OSAS, but it's, get it up, you know, like we just got the scores, the confirmed scores for last year. You have different kids now sitting in front of you. So it gives you really good information for a system, for a school, like, oh, wow. And year after year, maybe my, you know, certain part of math scores are weaker than others. So I'm gonna beef up my instruction for that, but it's not impacting the student that you had last year because you don't have that student anymore. But Acadian's data you can act upon. You can dive in deeper in reading instruction. Just a tool.
And how often is it done?
Well, there's progress monitoring for some students, so that's that, and sometimes every week, every 2 weeks, but the benchmark scores are 3 times a year. Fall,
Okay.
winter, spring.
So then when we get to the winter and spring and see that a student potentially is not going to be at grade level, we can create a summertime plan for them to give them additional supports. Whereas if we use OSAS, we get those results later, then that becomes problematic to create the kind of support that we think the board is looking for.
Right, that was another reason, if we
What's-
really do want
what's-
to have summer school for those students.
What's the process of getting them into the summer support?
Well, we have not done it before, so
Okay.
we haven't created it.
Okay,
So,
So,
I mean,
It would be invitation,
this is gonna be invitational. It's not gonna be.
it'd be invitation.
So I'm thinking, if someone moves into the district, they don't have the history. Would this still be available to a student who wanted to take summer?
I think that would be depending on the resources we have in any given year. Some summers, yes, we get support from the state and we'd be able to offer that. Other summers, like this past summer, we were pretty shoestring. And so we would be focused on the students that had been here and we knew needed the support. And that's not fair. We know that everybody would need the support, but we would have to. I could not blanket say, yes, we realize you just moved in here 3 months ago and you're 3 years behind in your reading. We're gonna bump somebody else out of a slot that we already committed to one of our students that have been here longer. We would want to offer that. I can't promise you we can offer it every summer. Does that make sense?
Mhm, I'm
Because
just-
it's
just
financial
thinking
support from
about
the state.
the ramifications of those kind of choices.
Right, which is why this says you've been here for a certain amount of time.
Ideally, we would be able to offer a rich summer reading program for all students who need it. There's obviously a financial cost, but more. I don't know, more than that, but I also have to have people who have the time and skill and willingness to do it. And I'm not always in complete control over that, so. Given that we have the resource to do it, we would have it for all of our students.
We would love to have comprehensive after-school programs,
Right.
things like that as well.
There-
We're working towards that.
Great.
Yes.
And
kind of a follow-up maybe to Debbie's comment or question, if a new student does come in, are they given this right away as
Yeah.
part of the assessment on kind of where you at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that when we moved here a little over 5 years ago. I think our kids were, look at my Redwood peeps over there. I think they were assessed very quickly. It's instant data
Yep.
on how they're doing.
I mean, the most powerful use of a test help the person who took the test improve.
Which Acadians gives us not everything we need, we dive in a lot deeper in a lot of cases, but this gives us actionable information. And OSAS does not. In the timeliness that we want it to be.
Well, the other, I prefer the district to use their own measurement standards because the state decides being late and a bunch of other things tend to change their standard, making it not possible to compare over time and stuff like that. It's another issue with stuff that's come about. One thing about this is it's listed as a resolution. I actually prefer it to be a policy. So is there any reason we couldn't make it a policy?
Off the top of my head, you come up with one. And certainly pick it to the 24th to the policy committee and have them reword it. But. Is anybody thinking,
I'm not sure why it would. In a practical sense, why it matters, but
yeah, I did. If you want it as a policy,
Well,
we could certainly reword it, find a policy identification mark for it and present it on the 24th.
So I keep
prefer that.
going back to resources. And, you know, if another downturn hits and we have to start cutting back on programs or personnel, how does
Well,
that work
it
with
would mean that-
resolutions versus policy?
assuming we would still be able to do the, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, I was just gonna say, we've been doing our summer school that was presented at the last board meeting. It would mean less of that. And more targeted to reading. So instead of having the enrichment opportunities that we've been able to have, we'll probably
and
focus on this.
And if it was a board policy, we would have a caveat on there based on the district's ability to provide the program. Financial ability to provide the program. Whereas it's a resolution, I don't have to have that, but if it's board policy, I'm gonna put in there based some kind of caveat that says when funding's down. We're gonna limit the how much resources we can provide towards this program.
And then I look at the sentence in the last paragraph where it says will have a summer school experience available to them at no cost. And to me, that implies if you don't fit into this category, that money will buy you that opportunity is. So,
That's
I'm-
not what we intended to imply.
but I'm just saying that's the way it came across to me, so maybe it would come across that way to other people.
Okay. I hear what you're
That
saying.
we would pay for them to go to something other than what we're doing.
You know,
Is
that
what
as
you're
a
saying?
parent, I could say, here's my money, teach my kid.
No additional costs.
Yeah. We can work on that.
I'm just saying, you know, if I had just moved to the district,
Mhm.
didn't fit into the category, my kid's behind. Can I pay you to teach my child during the summer?
I
You
guess
know, yeah, so
Yeah.
wordsmith it how you want.
temperature of the room, do you want a resolution or do you want me to bring this to policy?
You know, I guess for me, the difference between resolution and policy, there's an accountability factor. There seems to be an
It
accountability
is the
factor.
law of the land.
Where resolution is, we resolve to, but no guarantees. Or you know, maybe we will get there, maybe we
Well,
won't.
it's a statement that this is important to
Yeah,
us.
yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, you resolve to do something, sure.
Correct. Mhm.
But it lacks the accountability. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying there's a difference there.
I think you're saying it well.
Yeah, there's an implied difference and I guess what concerns me about it being a policy is if the children are not required to go to summer school. How are you going to reach the goal if it's in somebody else's hands besides yours? And that's what makes it difficult if it's a policy.
Yes, it does.
So
Could you articulate the goal for me?
the goal, well, it says that at least 3 years, 92% better attendance or reading at grade level.
That's not a goal. That's a requirement on the student.
We are committed to insurance. If it's a goal, if we're committed to ensuring it's gonna happen.
If I meet the Acadians reading assessments standard. If they're there 92% of the time.
Yeah.
At least 3 years.
But if you ensure something, it sounds to me like you have a goal going.
Our goal is to have all of our students ready for the next grade level.
Sure. And I think that's a wonderful goal.
Mhm.
I'm just struggling between the resolution and the policy. And if you're putting the onus on the parent and the kid to come to summer school, if they need the work, you can't control that.
So if it's a policy, maybe there needs to be some language that. Like here, it says 92% or better, that takes into account the fact that you don't always have control over how well their attendance is gonna be. So maybe there needs to be some language, if it's policy, as to whether or not they actually opt to go to the summer school if they need to. The additional learning. Because I see what you're saying. It's like you're setting yourself up for failure. If something's out of your control, you're saying we will have this result.
Let's just give an example. Okay, third grade, what percentage of third grade is that level? 60%, did you say 70%, 60%?
It's not that, it's
Not
not
that.
high yet after.
Okay.
I have to go. for it.
If you
And-
take into all the criteria that Gary had given us. Then at the fifth grade level, we are very successful getting students who've been with us for a while. That come to school on a regular basis. Right?
Right.
That don't have other concerning things. We can get students to read at above a 60% level.
Right.
Yes.
So you need caveats, is that what you're
And-
saying?
and what
Well, if
we
it's
did with-
policy.
Yeah, what we did is we didn't use fifth grade. We said, when we see that you're not at grade level. We want to give you support.
Yeah, what I'm getting at you is,
Without waiting till.
what I'm getting at is 30% of the kids are not at grade level. Okay,
Well,
you're gonna require, and you're gonna ask for, I'm just using this as an example.
70% of the kids aren't at grade level. That's some, or 65% of some of the grade levels are not at grade.
Yeah, well, let's just
Okay,
give one, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
which one, I'm just giving an example.
right.
If 30% of them are not, 35%, 40% are not at grade level. And you have a policy, but you're putting it in the parents' hands, then you have to find a way to get that 35% of those students, which might be 4 or 5. So when you put all grades together, it could be many, many students to
Yes, it
get to
could.
summer school to be able to do this. And that's where the policy becomes a problem, I think.
Right.
I would also say, based on what you said, I appreciate the difference between resolution and policy, and if that makes sense to me, hopefully everybody else is on board. It's easier right now for me to say, yeah, resolution, great. If we were to go into a discussion about a policy, I would want to know the financial impact.
Yeah.
What you just
That's
said
exactly
means
right.
30% of our population would be in a summer program. What does that cost?
That's exactly right.
What programs get axed because of that? So that's a lot more in depth to go into the policy, but there's also nothing saying we don't do both, because if you want to say something that says we want to do this and we want to figure out how to do it, we just don't know how yet. Let's resolve to do it, and then the next step would be, okay, let's dive into the details and figure out a policy that works with the money side tied to it, because it's a big deal.
And I think part of the think one of the points is for there to be a public statement about how important reading is to this board and this district and this community. And so putting something in writing and in a resolution, whether it's of these exact words or not, is the attempt to address that public statement. There are many things that are completely out of our control. That just is the way it is. And I could talk for probably longer than you want to spend today on all of the things we're currently doing with reading instruction. We just had a PD last Friday. Or already in plan, I've got a PD presenter coming next week with a kindergarten. We're already planning our next PD. It's all about reading. So I could talk about the tangible things that we do have control over. And that we have control over in the classroom. Summer school is an additional thing that, no, I can control the content and the instruction of that summer school. I can't guarantee that all eligible students would attend. But it is something in addition to that gives a little bit of weight to our public statement that we are working hard and doing things, and reading is in the area of reading because it is that important.
See, I agree with Dustin, with Member Smith. And that is that you begin with a resolution with the goal of having a policy. But I think that, and I am in full support of if anywhere, a full summer school, completely paid for and financed with administration and everything else, where every child who is struggling goes to summer school or goes to Saturday school for that matter. But I don't think you can begin with a policy for those reasons that you gave. Financially, it's you got to go through the finances of it and the operations and all that kind of stuff.
And I just want to say again, because summer school will help, absolutely, and will catch some kids up. But the real power is what's happening in the classroom every day with our students. And so when you talk about it going to a policy and there being financial implications, there's a lot more to talk about, because when you're making choices, we'll get a lot more bang for our buck for what we already are doing and working to get better at in the classroom right now.
And thank you, by the way, for saying that, Joe. Based on something you said, I agree with you. I'm curious if we were to go with the resolution, if we actually need to broaden the language or leave more wiggle room in there, because you just threw out Saturday school. There's multiple ways to address this issue. To include in addition to summer school. And so if the resolution is too specific, it doesn't help us down the road. And you'd almost want it to be broader or more open-ended by just saying that the district would implore strategies and things such as summer school, right? Something like
It
that.
could say students, instead of students will have additional instructional opportunities. And then the rest available, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that would broaden it to other after school, Saturday, summer school.
Yeah.
After school.
And so really, we talked about the kind of a small picture. And the issue that keeps coming up is resources. And so if you're going to talk about resources, that's a budget question. And where on this board's list of priorities is making sure our students read.
I would think it's very high.
So if it's very high, then we need to be having those conversations with superintendent and his staff before the budget's created for next year, to make sure that there's adequate resources to support those high priority goals of the board.
Sure.
How do we make that happen?
Well, I think we're gonna have a very good idea of how much money we're gonna have from the state, because it'll be the second year of the biennium. We're in a bit of flux because our business manager is leaving next Friday, so we've got a new business manager starting. We could probably give you some rough ideas by December 1-ish on what we have for discretionary spending. And then figure out how we want to earmark the discretionary spending we have available.
And you have to be having put summer schools into schools before in my former
Yes.
positions.
Yes.
You don't do it in 1 year.
No.
I mean, it's an incremental process. It's like starting a new school. It's a very difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of work, a lot of planning, strategic planning, all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
You just don't say, we're gonna start summer school next year for everybody. There's an incremental process and that's why I love the resolution idea. I think you market this, you put this out to parents. They become well informed that this opportunity is for them. And even say that we are looking to move forward to even advance this to what you were talking about, Gary, where we actually fund summer schools or Saturday schools or whatever the strategic planning says. But I think the whole idea of a summer school is a strategic planning issue too.
Yeah.
So,
And so when we start talking about what our discretionary spending is, we have to. Is this board going to direct a 12% ending fund balance? Is this board going to direct that we have X amount of dollars in contingency spent funds available? Are we going to have a sink fund and continue to grow a sink fund? Are we going to offer all the extracurricular activities that we continue to offer? When we say, okay, yes to all these things, our discretionary funding becomes very limited very quickly. So,
that's why it's strategic planning.
right. So we have funds available if we're at a 10% ending fund balance, right? Or if we're not adding $200,000 to $300,000 a year each year to a single fund, right? Those kind of things. But when the board says do all these things and give staff raises and get our classified staff,
Sure.
the biggest raise of, didn't you say in the history of the district, right? So we can do anything. We can't do everything. So there you go.
You heard it, you can do anything.
We can do everything.
So, legally, is there anything that prevents District 7 from permanently having school during the summer and requiring students to attend?
Legally,
That's a great question.
no.
Yeah, I don't think you can require.
Why?
I think I'd have to fact check myself, but there's some laws related to compulsory attendance and the amount of days in school. That I would want to double check.
We could check on that, but we could conceivably create a year-round calendar, not with larger winter break, larger spring break, things like that, if that's what you're asking. If you're saying, can we go from 190 days to 220 days? You're right, we can't do anything like that, because there is a state calendar of number of days that you can have instruction.
I think that says how many units.
This is a minimum.
Minimum.
Nope, it's minimum and maximum.
Okay.
Yep.
But length of day isn't required. There isn't a length of day stipulation, is there? Like, for example, after school. After normal school hours.
We can provide that. Yeah,
you-
there's minimum seat requirements. I don't know that there's a maximum seat requirements.
These are questions that would get into the strategic planning aspect of it,
Yes.
though, so.
Yeah.
But I think, I like the resolution. I think the resolution's great. I think the addition that Gary talked about is important on the resolution. But I also think it's really important that parents whose children are in crisis or struggling or whatever the case may be, that they are made very well aware of what the opportunities are going to be for them and
Yes.
what it means to that child
Absolutely.
in the long term and what you will do, what the school will do to help them and a lot of that.
Last thing I wanted to say to this is, again, with personal experience, I know that there's a lot that's already happening under this program towards this goal. Because when my kids first came and didn't meet the benchmark, or whether it was throughout the year, they were pulled out of class and they were giving additional help for reading. And it was happening on an individual basis, even without a 504 or IEP. Kudos to our team of experts that's doing this already, doing the best they can with our current
We have
program.
a system it's
Thank
called
you for
Response
saying
to
that.
Instruction and Intervention, RTII. And that is our system for how we run reading and math. To make sure that we know where all students are. And target instruction appropriately. Get kids the tools that they need.
Since we can do anything, but we can't do everything. We need to prioritize any things we're gonna do. And which things are important. To do that. It affects the budget. And you can't do that. In May.
No, that's why I was saying November can start. I would say. Did I say November or December? December.
I like November.
Yeah, I was like, Sam's just getting his feet under him, so give it a couple months.
And that tells me too, like the idea of a resolution and then down the road of policy, it's really more resolution, then it's. What are the strategies? How much do those cost? Evaluate the cost in the strategy. And then at some point, once you got your hands wrapped around all of that, then we can talk policy, because then we're into the specifics of exactly what are we talking about doing? How much, can we make it happen? And what are the specifics that will, everybody agrees will have the most impact?
So I wanna say this. So I think it's important that I'm. Not misleading the board in any way. To talk about budget priorities, we can do that in December. If you want a deep dive into how much it's gonna cost to build a reading program for how many kids and how we're going to get all of that. I'm really saying that we can do this resolution this year. But what you're asking for is a more long-term strategic planning kind of thing. And we're not gonna put it together in 60 days.
No.
And so I just want to make sure that that's being heard.
Mhm.
Okay, this is.
I hear
we're-
that.
What's that?
I hear that.
We're willing to do the deep dive. We just need time to
Mhm.
get to the depths. So, all right, I just don't want December 1st, like
Right.
you said.
And that's why I think I wanted, like, as far as an order of things, that the policy still probably is far out then, if that's the case, because I can't see, at least personally, agreeing on a lot of specificity of a policy with no knowledge of cost. And even if we can do anything, then it's like, well, but now what are we not doing?
Correct.
Because we
Before
agreed
you
to
ever-
do this.
yeah.
It's like,
Yes,
Before you ever get to.
a bad legislature who's passing a bill and they don't know how much it's gonna cost the taxpayers.
Before you ever get the cost, you gotta go through the whole planning process, staffing.
Yeah.
What the program is gonna be,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
My translation of all this was. Tim could actually get. All the third graders, 100% of them, to read at grade level. If we sacrifice. All other spending. Susan can make it happen.
Susan's been.
And required them to go.
And
so.
I just read an article today, I think it was on the OSBA reading list somehow, about the history of the reading programs in Oregon over the last 30 years, maybe, and the U of O study regarding the science of reading and the politics that did away with the funding of actually implementing that, and the resolve of current political figures in the state of what they think should be the next steps, and that all probably should need to be addressed in the deep dive. Because there are things beyond our control in the works for third grade reading, for instance.
Right.
And that's the
Um,
work that we are doing. We're
Yeah.
doing it regardless of a resolution or a policy or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yeah.
We started it in August. We continued it last Friday with October 27th is our next day, plus what's happening at staff meetings and grade level team meetings. And so we are doing that work there.
So do I interpret the board's will to be that you've offered a few language changes in
Yeah, right
here,
here.
that we will make those changes and we will present this on Tuesday night to the board for the board to vote on a resolution, not a policy? Does that make sense?
That's where I am.
Am I interpreting the
Can you-
will of the board
Can you
correctly?
read the maybe softened language? And that was
last
the idea
paragraph.
that I had. I don't know if everybody else agrees with
last-
that.
And maybe you can tell me if I captured what you were saying. So the last paragraph. Therefore be it resolved, why am I trying to read without my glasses? I don't know. A student who has not met the standard will have a summer, oh, I didn't see it there. Will have, I gotta change it there. Well, skip to the next sentence. A student will have additional instructional opportunities available to them each year until they have reached their reading goal. And I could put that in the first part too, students will have. Who has not met the standard will have additional instructional opportunities available to them. I just changed summer school to additional instructional opportunities because then that can encompass anything. Different program.
Yeah.
An online
Something
program,
like that.
Saturday school, and after school, a summer school, it just.
Or so it would be, so not met the standard, will have additional instructional
Opportunities.
opportunities to help prepare them for the next grade level, something like that.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we're still trying to control factors that we don't have total control over. You know, we're only going to offer these opportunities to kids we've had for 3 years already. Is that ethical? Is that discriminatory? Is it going to be perceived as discriminatory?
I think that's a really good question. I think that's really-
Maybe this isn't.
I think the best way to address that is that's sort of leftover language for if we were gonna guarantee that they could read at grade level, we were gonna say, you gotta come to school to receive the guarantee. So, given the way the language has been changed and softened, I'm not sure that's relevant.
I was gonna say, I see it that as. That middle paragraph is kind of stating the goal, right?
I
You
would,
come to school, you're here, you're with us 3 years with solid attendance. We're saying you're gonna be reading at grade level. And then in addition to that. It could be all students who have not met the standard, so it's regardless
Yeah.
of that. So it's like, here's our statement of a goal, but then. We're also going to do this for all students, right? Yeah.
If I understand what you're saying, so you're kind of getting rid of that 92% in 3 years.
For this, for the additional instructional opportunities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that would be best.
Yeah, question. On the kids that are on an IEP, so they're not being assessed
They have their
through
own,
Acadians.
they are being assessed through Acadians, but they have their own goals.
Okay, so it's a different matrix based on what the team decides where they're at, and
Exactly.
what they need to reach.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we have our marching orders. Present a resolution on Tuesday night.
And there again, I know everybody wants every child to be reading at their grade level, and that's the goal. And the district has been, and the teachers and the staff have been working diligently towards that. And hopefully, as better practices can be implemented, they will be.
Yep, I'm excited. I'm super excited about the work we're doing.
And more resources would be better.
The retort.
All right.
You're right, that's why we're talking about it.
7.2, policy KAB, parental rights.
Yes. All right, at the policy committee last week, we talked about, the parental rights, KAB. I offered, under, a highlighted area, the board will consider parental feedback when making decisions. The board recognizes that parents have the right to. And then there's 1 through 9, and you said you wanted some time to take a look at that. Was that enough time? Do we want to wait till October 24th at the next policy committee? Where would you like to go with that?
I couldn't hear this conversation. I was in limbo with that, with my computer up there. Personally, I would like a little more time.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a quick question? You know, number 9 is 2 board listening sessions per year. Is the upcoming October 17th meeting like the data night? Would that be a listening session?
It would not. That's a data walk. So I think that would, I think we could answer that better on 7.3 on your agenda.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we don't have to have 9 on this, but I mean, we can, you can do whatever you want to that language. But how many of you, is everybody okay with Joe's suggestion that we kick this to the 24th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna spend 20 minutes on down, 20 minutes on the 24th. Okay. Good.
Okay. 7.3, board listening session with community members. This is something that was brought up early on. The new board members and wanting to engage the community.
So what would you like that to look like? Or do you want that to look like something? It was suggested at the July board meeting that we wanted to have some listening opportunities for the board. We are happy to start setting those up. If that's what you'd like. Do you want it on a weekend morning? Do you want it on an evening? Do you want to have like a couple board members sitting at a coffee shop at a specific time and coffee with the board? What are your thoughts? How can I help you set something up for you to have a listening session with the community?
I thought that was a superintendent suggestion. When we said that we were going to take all the extracurricular funds and put in reading, that you said we needed to listen.
For that one, you would. I would be in the audience. I want to be up front.
Yeah.
So, yes. But previous to that conversation, back in the summertime, there was a different conversation. So I've had one board member recommend bagels with the board at a local little eatery. And we're happy to do whatever you want. We can have the food service, create a little thing. We can have a listening session in here. Yes, sir.
I would advocate for making it a neutral place and non-formal. I think it would help people to see each other as human beings rather than sit behind a desk. And
So how about pizza at Wild River Pub or something like that? A couple times a year or something like that.
I have a question.
Yes.
To me, the question is, what is the goal? What is the outcome you want here? Do you want as many people as possible to be able to come in and sort of get the mystery of what the board does off the table?
Okay.
Or do you
Well,
want?
don't look at me.
No, I'm not asking you.
Okay.
But I'm just asking this in general. Do you want it to be just people who have specific concerns to come in and talk? Do you want it to be educational for families? Because they're very different scenarios. A scenario like, and I was a little cavalier, and I apologize for that this summer when it was brought up, but I did, because I don't dislike the idea. To me, the question is, what's the purpose? Because there are different kinds of meetings. If it's a bagels and with the board, it's more light. it's just a few people, because you're not gonna be sitting around with 50 or 60 people.
So I'm gonna defer to Dustin here.
Yeah, Cassie's giving me the stink eye over there, like,
Speak up.
speak up.
It was your idea.
I must have said.
It
something at
was
some
you
point to
that
get
did
this. I think what's behind this is, for me personally, talking to parents in the district, there has been in the past a feeling of disconnect from the board. You kind of mentioned maybe or somebody mentioned like how the board works. There might be a perception that like we all get together and do secret handshakes, and although you were winking at me, because I kind of winked there. And all this stuff happens, you know, and there's not a lot of transparency. So I think the goal is, can we do something to fix that perception of lack of transparency? Can we be more connected with parents who want to say something and maybe don't want to come to a 3-hour meeting and say something, and then we're not even required to respond to them in any way? Like you presented it, I don't necessarily know what the answer to that is, but that I think is the problem, and maybe a goal to overcome that problem. I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Can I just say a quick follow-up? Because I think this is important. When the board suggests something, we take it really seriously, even when you don't remember that you suggested something.
Right on.
Right? We work hard to make sure we're meeting the needs of the board.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure you're hearing that.
Yeah.
We do take these little things that you say and we churn on them and we work on them. And when you say do no harm, we're in the office the very next day saying, what does that mean? How do we work forward with that? And so I just want to make sure you're hearing that.
Yeah, very much appreciated. And I think in turn, again, speaking from my personal experience as a board member, I feel the same obligation to parents in the community that you are expressing about the board. So I want to make sure that if somebody doesn't feel heard for whatever reason, that we give them every opportunity. And then once they do, that we're going to take that seriously. If somebody wants to say something, we're listening, and we want to respond to concerns, ideas, whatever it may be. So
I think it's a good idea. There's definitely value in allowing people to have access to their elected officials. In fact, I was just talking to one of the county commissioners about that today, and some of the work that they do just to allow people to come and talk to them about whatever. You're not making promises, you're making sure you're managing expectations, just because they're talking to you that something is going to happen. But it's a listening session, it's the ability to bond, really keep your finger on the pulse of what members of the community are thinking about certain issues. So I think it's a really good thing, and I'd be for it. How we shape it up, obviously we gotta, kind of talk about how, what it would look like and all of that, but I think it's a great idea.
Well, the question for me again would get back, what's the outcome you want out of these meetings? And I think you've articulated one outcome right there, and you've basically articulated the same thing he did as well. Do you have a parent back to school night?
what did I articulate, by the way?
This whole idea of connecting with the parents, connecting with the community.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think you could, as you go, you could make, if you want to add in something like there's a certain something we want to ask, you could add in a special certain topic. As you go, but I think that, the main thing is to just have your finger on the pulse. You're accessible to the public.
Is there a parent back to school night?
Not at the elementary schools, because we do a slow start to the school year, so the parents meet individually.
They have individual parent meetings at elementary, but there are.
And our middle school parent nights were the night of the September board meeting, which is why we didn't have middle school principals here. Well, Robert was here, but had to run.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the high school does.
Wednesday was both Gladiola, GP Flex, and
And then
Principal High
we
School.
also have parent meetings for fall athletics, and we'll do a parent meeting for winter.
So there's not a school-wide parent back to school?
No.
Okay.
No,
The only reason I ask that is because the potential of having one meeting where the board can just meet with all the parents and board process can be discussed, questions can be answered, that sort of stuff where you have a large group, and to be able to do that, but it sounds like that's.
so how would it feel?
We can't require the parents to come,
Yeah.
just like we can't require the students to go to summer school.
Yeah, but you would have it, you can't require them to come to back to school night either.
Right.
Anyhow, to me, it's the question, I'm all for it, I think the reasoning behind it is great. It's again, what's the venue and what's.
So at the fear of taking so long to talk about what we want to do, that we end up in the springtime. Would the board care if we created a night to have pizza with the board? You would not be in front of the audience, but you might be a board member at a table and people would come and mingle with you, and it would be, I'm your elected official. Glad you're here, shake your hand. Make sure you know that you can talk to me if you have questions, and let's maybe just do something
And give them our card.
and give them your card.
There you go.
And then that way we can, and then we can expand from that. But I think it's one of those things that if we talk about it again in 3 months,
I think it's a
Right.
great idea.
I think it's an excellent idea. I just also want to say that it is part of our responsibility as elected officials to be at school events as well, giving
Yes.
that initial thought, but yes, giving a platform to
especially
have
with football
parents.
games.
Okay, I missed one.
And I will not be at this Friday's football game, but
So why don't we set a date? We can figure out the rest of it between now and then.
Yeah,
And
I
we-
think, see how it goes.
Yeah.
Pick a venue and go for it.
yeah.
I
We
think
will,
it's a great opportunity for Kristen to exercise some of those communication skills to get a whole bunch of people to show up.
so. We okay with doing something in early November? Before OSBA?
Let me check.
Okay, we'll send out some dates and you guys get back to us. on those. Okay. I only say that because between my wife and I, we have 20 of the 31 dates in October with the evening event. I'm excited about adding
We
another one.
You're popular over there.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Well, there's only 4 options if we did it for OSBA. It's the first, the second, the sixth, and the seventh.
Great, we'll send those out and we'll let people let us know.
Not the second.
We'll send those out. We'll let people let us know.
Okay, 7.4, youth survey.
All right, so we were asked some questions about the Youth Truth Survey. We did send you some links over the weekend for you to take a look, see at. And
For those riveting. A lot of information.
a lot of information on it. So Trish is gonna be running this segment of the programs. And do you want to just kind of jump into it and, or do you want to see if there's questions to start that board members have? You do what, you run it. You let me know.
I can do it either way.
You do you.
Huh?
You do you.
Me do me. We thought it would be helpful to give you enough background information since there were so many different questions about the Youth Truth Survey. So the PowerPoint is intended to kind of give you a bit general overview. But you were provided all the data for the elementary, middle, and high school surveys from last year. And all of the student comments as well. So why do we survey? And we do give us several surveys, but this is very specific to the Youth Truth Survey. So why do we give the Youth Truth Survey? We want to know. We want to hear from our students. We want to hear from our parents. We want to hear from our staff and gather as much input about our programs and our education system. Many of our grants require that we do gather community input, and they require us to give surveys. So some examples of that are like student investment account, high school success. We also, with federal dollars, Title 1A and Title 2A are examples, require some amount of input, and surveys are a great way to collect that. So when we write those grants, we then cite, well, in Youth Truth, this is what % of our staff responded on this, or our parents responded on that. It helps our school improvement planning process. It's important to the work of various teams. There is a new law that got passed this summer. I don't have the details, but I will say, I think some things might change about how we survey, so more to come on that. House Bill 2656 requires some surveys to be given. And then last, it allows all of our stakeholders to have a voice and to know that they're being heard. So each one of our schools tries to utilize this data and share it with the various stakeholders. You'll see data from it at our community engagement activity on October 17th. How long have we been giving youth truth survey? We've been doing that since 1819, so we're going into our 6th year. Elementary schools began using them in 21-22. We give the survey in March. Parents are provided notice ahead of time. They're given access and a copy of the survey, and they are given a form, which in the documents I sent you an example of, I sent you the actual opt-out form that parents use. We have had students at each location be opted out of the survey. The survey is 100% anonymous. Youth Truth does not collect any personal identifiable information. And a student can skip any survey question they're not comfortable with. They're not required to be answered.
Trish, is there any way to tie any of that information back to a specific student, or is it just pooled?
There's no way to tie it back to a specific student.
So if there's I believe it or not, I actually looked through a lot of the information that was on it. It was just a ton, but I was reading, I kind of went down the rabbit hole, reading comments from the kids.
I was gonna say, go to the rabbit hole in comments.
And it was very interesting seeing the variety of comments that were made. So if, I guess my question is, if there was a comment on there that was really disturbing, like a student saying they're thinking about self-harm because they're being bullied, is there any way to find out who or where that came from?
There is not. We've come across that at, the high school's been doing the surveys the longest, and Ryan and I have come across statements of concern, not just around suicide, but drug use, calling out for help of lots of different ways. There is no way for us to identify that student, but it does help us be more proactive in our supports, trying to reach out to as many kids as we can to find them.
Trish, if I can ask a question, I looked through this stuff as well, and I can't remember which survey it was on. It might have been on the student survey, but it was based on the demographics. And it was showing responses, it was comparing the responses of the various demographics, whether it was Caucasian, Black, Hispanic, so forth and so on. And then it had the LGBTQ and that sort of thing. And this is coming from past experience, which was incredibly troubling for me, what I discovered when I was in the education world. And that was the differences between boys and girls. And I didn't see that distinguishing difference in there. For example, I discovered, and we know this now, that 60% of those, 68% of those are going off to college are girls, and only 30+% are boys that are going off to college. The other thing we discovered is a lot more boys were receiving drugs like Ritalin and things like that than girls. And much of that was being given because boys were being diagnosed as ADHD and so forth, when simply they were being boys. Okay. And that's a deep, deep concern of mine, because it gets back to the drug issue, but also gets back to the difference of it. And they even had teachers that would say to me, it was private education, so you need to understand that. Why don't we just be a girls' school? They're much easier to deal with. They're easier to teach, which means 50% of the population is left out of the experience. But I think that is such a huge demographic when you think about that. What, 3, 4, 5, 6% fall in the LGBTQ group in this area? It's maybe 1% or Asian or Pacific Islanders, 10, 6, 8% or Spanish or Hispanic. And I know the African American population is very low as well, but the boy-girl differentiation is huge. And I think that's a really important thing to look at, because in my opinion, and it's my opinion of after years of education, is boys are being incredibly underserved in the education world.
I'm gonna show you a couple of things. I'm not gonna go out to the live survey because it would take you, like Nathan said, you could go down a rabbit hole with this stuff. But I can set the graphs up. What I sent you in the graphs is one way to look at it. I can do every single one of those questions by boy, girl, or
Okay.
other ways students self-identify.
Okay, good.
So I can disaggregate the questions. The surveys look at core theme, this Youth Truth survey looks at core themes of student engagement, relationships, culture, academic challenge, instructional methods, and belonging. It does vary a little bit at middle and high school. And then the family survey, there's lots of alignment you can draw between what's asked in the student survey on engagement, what's asked in the staff survey on engagement, and what's asked on the family survey. And you can see some trends and information there as well. So those core themes kind of help us. I'm really going to focus on the high school survey for a lot of the data I'm going to show you. And this shows you the core areas that were on that last slide for the high school. Each of the summary measures, our district in 2023, our district in 2022, other typical Youth Truth schools. This is a nationwide survey. It's given to every state. There are school districts that offer this survey. And then there are others in the state of Oregon, so typical Oregon schools. And that percent is the percent of students who, it's a 5-point scale on the high school scale, and it's the percent of students who were, who marked more positively than negatively on that particular area. So, for example, you can look at academic challenge in 2022. Students responded more favorably and less favorably in 2023. So what was that? Where was the question? What were the questions being asked about academic challenge? And then what do we need to do to address those concerns students were expressing in that percent positive? You'll also see, but beyond the themes of the surveys, you'll see some additional questions like obstacles to learning. Do any of the following make it hard for you to do your best in school? So feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious. So 57% of our students in 2023 at the high school said yes. Feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious makes it hard for me to do my work. Do distractions from home or responsibilities with your family cause you to be stressed or cause you obstacles to learning? So again, there's so much to learn in this particular survey. Math learning mindsets, another question, and that helps us. You know, math is an area of focus for us, and so getting feedback from our students about their challenges related to math.
So Trish, what do we do to validate that these surveys are accurate?
Right. Well, Youth Truth really helps us with all of that work. The last slide, you're going to see one of the things that makes the survey more valid is the more survey responses you get. You'll see at the very last slide, the high school responses was a lot lower this year, percentage wise, based on the goal. So that makes your data less valid and reliable. And so there's some various reasons for that to look at. They also do a lot of Youth Truth because they do so many of the surveys nationwide. They can norm the data, and that could be a whole nother. I'm not necessarily the aficionado on that, but there is a lot of work they do to validate.
Well, what percentage of the students lie on the surveys? And there's actually ways,
Right.
there's actually ways to validate that. Not for the whole survey, but statistically. You essentially sample and interview students who have taken the survey and get some impression of how valid are the responses that you're using to generate all this data.
Right.
Do they do that?
I'd have to ask you through if they've done that kind of validation. My guess is they've done things similar to that. I know they do a lot of student focus groups to get at that very question. And so I could gather some more information to share with you. I know, having given the survey now for 6 years, and if you read through those comments, I don't think those are lies. I think there's a lot of truth in what kids are saying, and what they have to express in those comments and that information. So do they, on every single question, answer to the, full extent of what, I think it's that moment in time for them and how they're feeling about the given question that's being asked of them in the moment. So
Do you think about time of the year? What time of the year do you get the survey?
in March. We were giving it in the fall at the beginning of our 6 years ago. We started in the fall, and for various reasons, Ryan and the team at the high school at the time, we decided to move it to March. Some of it has to do with other testing and surveying that's happening throughout the course of the year and not needing to double up on stuff. And March before spring break felt like a really good time to, people are looking forward to the breaks, students are looking forward to the break, staff and parents, a good time to get some information from them about the school year experience so far.
I'm just gonna throw out just something to think about, and that is, the ebb and flow of the school year in terms of emotional involvement and emotional satisfaction with the school. There's actually curves that have been put together for that.
Right, and if you looked at so we can do all 6 years of data comparison. One of the beautiful things about having done it for so long is we can check. You talk about statistic reliability over time. When we were giving it in the fall, where our scores were versus where they are in the spring, we can look at that now.
They're probably
And we
higher
see
in the
that.
fall than they would be in
We
the
see
spring.
that, yeah. It depends on the question, to be frank and honest.
Also, the higher the end, you have the
Yeah.
lower the standard
Yeah.
deviations.
That's why really Youth Truth really pushes us to a certain percentage of participation
Yeah.
in order to really look at the data as valid and reliable.
Take care of it.
We could give it the first week in April.
Pardon me?
We could give it the first week in April and our scores would go up right after spring break.
Oh.
Give it right before spring
We
break.
start giving the state assessment.
and
for
just
math,
keep-
it just-
No, but it's really.
Yeah.
The week before spring break, we're tired. It's been a long, right? The week after spring break, we come back and we're refreshed. It's those kind of things. You're absolutely right. When you choose to do that.
How do you know when you're not skewing the data, when you make decisions like that? Because you do it when people are happier. And there's questions that are subjective, like feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious. That's a very subjective thing. We all deal with hardship differently, stress differently.
Right,
So it's, how do you, if you wait till people are happy and feeling fresh, you're skewing it. If you do it when people are, do it and then have an average. Well,
There's a time
I think,
issue, I understand.
and I think one of the key things to know too is how we look at the data. Data, you'll hear me say this anytime I show you all data over the years. Data is only one part of the story. You have to ask the questions, you have to go deeper, you can't look at it and say, well, that must be the answer.
Yeah.
But it's an indicator that then helps you dig deeper into, okay, what's the problem here? Or, "Ooh, this is going really well for us. What's working well and what can we learn from? What can we capitalize on?" So it's only meant to kind of get you to dig deeper and get you pointed in the right direction. We do ask some additional module questions about inclusion, mental health, school safety. You'll see some of these on the community data walk night too, by the way. I think I said that already. I think there was some concern over the gender question that's asked on the survey. So Youth Truth put together a history of our, because we have an option here and I put this in your materials as well in that Google Drive. There's a form that we fill out. Do you want to ask this question or do you want to ask this question? So when we started in the fall of 2018, it was just male, female, or I'd identify in another way I prefer not to say. And then we kept with that for a couple of years. Fall of 2020, we did not survey. We moved to the spring of 2021. How do you describe yourself? Spring of 2022, how the question was asked. And this is one of those demographic questions that students ask at the beginning. We do have a choice on what questions to ask. Why have we evolved over time? we've been listening to our students, so we have talked to them at town hall meetings or at leadership or in our club meetings, because we do try to gather input lots of different ways, and by asking the question, we are helping students who identify in different ways have a voice and represent that voice in the survey. So how do we look at the data? And we can disaggregate by all of that data as we go through. So for example, during one of the questions on the Youth Truth Survey is, during the school year, have other students bullied or harassed you? I had to set a filter to get this disaggregated data. I can set it by boy, girl. I can set it by special ed, not special ed. I can set it by Hispanic, Black, Asian. But I am sharing this piece of data with you, that students who identify as LGBTQ+ feel that they've been bullied or harassed during the year. Another question, when I'm feeling upset, stressed, again, I can set those graphs to be different demographics. And then what percent of students, for those that identify as LGBTQ+, feel like they have an adult in school who they can talk to. So we can disaggregate the data all kinds of ways. I've kind of mentioned some of those to you, and those are all, students have to self-report on the survey. So they're, what gender are you? What are you, an English language learner? Are you in special education? So yes, I guess they could lie on that, but our experience is that students care about who they are and they want to express who they are. So just some other ways we look at some subpopulations, and I also wanted to give you a sense of the questions that are asked, because, and I hope you read through every single survey question. These are really good questions to know about how kids are feeling. I didn't highlight any of the parent surveys or staff surveys for you, because I think the concerns that have been expressed are about what we do for students. But these are good questions. Has my school helped me figure out what career best matches my interest and abilities? So we can sort that by race in this particular case. My school has helped me understand the steps I need to take in order to apply for college, excuse me. And seeing the ratio of our male, female, or prefer not to describe how they answer. Where could we improve on that? I should point out real quick too. So you see the Oregon schools bar, and way back at the beginning, typical Oregon schools. So that blue line in the middle is the 50th percentile of all schools in Oregon. And so you can see we're above that in terms of other typical Oregon schools, in terms of students feeling like they know how to apply for college. And then we can compare year over year for ourselves as well. So last year we did better in this particular area.
You say 50th percentile, that's 2.5.
So of all the Oregon schools that took the Youth Truth
I'm looking
Survey,
at the numbers on the top. It would be 2.5 out of 5.
Doesn't
not
say.
cool.
303, I think.
It's you got
Yeah,
3.31, 3.03, 3.26. Is this based on a score of 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
5-point scale.
Gotcha.
The work that I do for class makes me really think. I can disaggregate it by grade level. We have found this interesting every single year about what our freshmen think versus what our upperclassmen think. So it's kind of always an interesting thing for us. And we share this data with our 9th grade success team about how kids are feeling about school. Students from my school treat adults with respect. You can see the difference between Gladiola High School and Grants Pass High School.
That's
Much
disappointing.
much different size of school. So the N size there is very different. And it's what we're hearing from kids. Do they feel like students are treating the adults at our school with respect? I told you about the response rates. The goal, the bottom of the chart, is what Youth Truth really pushes us for. They want to see 80% of our students. So we give them how many students are in the school. how many students survey, and so the goal is to get 80% of the schools surveyed in order for it to be valid and reliable. Really disappointed in our family survey last year from Grants Pass High School in Gladiola. We had 5%. The goal is really 30%. So if we were to look at any of our family surveys, you would really take some of those, like not as 100% statistically possible because of the fewer number of people who participated. And then same thing for staff. We had few staff at the high school level participate. So an opt-in model would also very much impact our ability to get a response rate that makes this data valid and reliable. And we did take seriously the do no harm conversation. And this was one of the things we talked about. By doing an opt-in model, who are you harming that will not have that ability to have that voice because they lose their permission slip or their parent doesn't follow through and sign it, that their voice won't have an opportunity to be heard. So it's important to us to continue doing the Youth Truth Survey in the format that we do. We do get it out to our parents. There is the opportunity to review the entire survey. I hope you read the entire survey. I would be interested in which questions you found on the survey to be a concern that you might think caused some harm, because I think that was said previously. This is really good information that has been valuable to us for the last 6 years. So that is some information, and you have all the survey data and information from last year in your materials.
Yeah, no, wait. Can we take a 5-minute break and then ask questions?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Trish. That was really well done. Thank you.
Okay.
My-
Yeah, you can. Oh, no, you don't. have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year was kind of,
Let's pick up where we left off, 7.5. Pronouns.
Nope.
Nope.
7.4 questions for Trish.
I had a question, but we took a break and I forgot it.
Trish paid me with cheese. Not to stop it right there before the question.
I'll start with a quick question. How long do the surveys take? Take to take? How long do they take?
Roughly about 30 minutes.
In middle school, we did them in the social studies class, which is 49 minutes, and kids didn't have trouble finishing. We tried to do it in our advisory class, 27 minutes, and it was not enough, so somewhere between that time frame.
I was asking Trish this, can it be mandatory for faculty?
It's because it's anonymous. We can't track it back to each staff member that does it, but we can do a better job of how the survey is given. In years past, you've done it in a staff meeting. Last year, we weren't able to accomplish that just because of timing.
And all staff do it classified and certified, so it's working it into their work schedule. Some employees are work 3.75 hours a day. It's just needing to be more systematic and careful to make sure everyone.
And make sure they have that space and time and computer.
I got a question. Trish, so this was mainly focused on Youth Truth, but we also do the seed survey, right?
No, we have
No.
elected not to give the seed survey.
Okay.
That's the one that the state is saying. I do not know this for certain, but I think we're gonna be required to do the seed survey, at which time then we'll have to make a decision about continuing with the Youth Truth Survey or not.
Yeah.
But we have chosen not to give the seed survey because it's a lot of surveys.
Right, and they all cost money.
A seed survey will be free. It's free to everyone in the state of Oregon. Youth Truth Survey does cost us money.
What about the Oregon Healthy Teens? Is that one we do?
That's one we do every other year. We will not be giving that survey this year, as this is the off year. And that is another one in that House bill I was referencing. I believe that's going to be mandated by Oregon Department of Ed. Or the law. Actually, it's a law because it's the legislators who mandated it.
Right, yeah, I actually read through that, I printed that off and read through it, it looks like there's exemptions from that.
Right.
As well.
For sure.
There was
And the seed survey
an
too.
amendment that went in. So, I actually have a ton of questions, but I'm not gonna, maybe we could even talk later on some of my questions, but I'm kind of curious. The surveys are interesting things, we were talking a little bit back there. You know, I've loved using surveys in some of my different jobs that I've had, whether it's with inmates or visitors to parks and that sort of thing. They certainly have their limitations. They're interesting. They can give you some ideas about how people are feeling. There's a lot of subjectiveness involved. There's, you know, you have control groups and stuff like that. So it's not as rigorous as a scientific study. It's a survey. So, you know, obviously the reason we do surveys is to get information that hopefully inform decision making. And you mentioned that you can't just make a decision based off of what you're saying. You got to dive a little deeper, find correlating evidence. I think that's what I heard you saying. Just to help me understand how the district uses this information, can you give an example of something that came out on a survey that was like, that's interesting, and then it informed a decision operationally or curriculum or whatever?
It's October is anti-bullying month. I don't know, that's an interesting fact. But we heard a lot in the spring about a lot of bullying and harassment in our district, specifically at North Middle School. We have used the bullying questions, you know, do you feel bullied? Why do you feel bullied? How are you bullied? We've used that data with staff this last Friday. Michelle Napier at the high school presented the bullying data from last year's Youth Truth Survey to the staff, and then engaged the staff in a meaningful conversation about how do we interrupt? How do we as the adults step in to help kids be kind, stop saying mean things to each other, to, you know, it seems to be a culture right now where kids think it's okay to, they're my friend, I'm just joking with them. They know I'm joking, but do they know you're joking? And the kid really sees it as bullying. So just recently, we've been able to use that bullying data to help kind of frame a conversation and get us launched off. Another example would be for Title II-A, which is our federal grant for professional development. We're able to go into the staff survey because there are questions specific about, does your district offer quality professional development? What else would you like by way of professional development? We're able to cite that source in that grant application, which is one of the things the grant's looking for us to do, and say this percent of our staff told us this. With the parent surveys, it helps us with that climate and culture. How are we developing a welcoming community? You'll see us use some of that data at our data walk. How are students feeling about this? How are parents feeling about this? Sometimes it's interesting, parents feel this way, but it's on the same question. So it helps frame conversations and shape the direction maybe the decision-making goes. That help?
I'll answer too, that literally the bathroom remodels, we had, well, nearly 30 comments from students about, I don't want to use the bathroom anymore. It's not a safe place. That helped guide the conversation. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Started that. We've also used it when we saw some comments about specific subsection of the high school, a department that helped educate us as the administration and go, we need to really step in and do something a little differently. It takes hours to read through that, and to be real blunt, summertime's the only time to do it well, because you just don't have time during the school year to do it well. But it guides, and school improvement planning. I know schools have used it for school improvement planning too.
Do you have a question?
I do. I've got a few. So I saw something listed up there, and I know it was in what you sent us. It wasn't talked about today, but sexual orientation is probably my biggest concern, not only personally, but based on community members that I've talked to. The question, are you male, female, boy, girl, man, woman, other, prefer not to say? That's like one thing, but like asking people like who they prefer to be intimate with or what they think they are. Starting at 6th grade, going all the way up. I really don't like the idea of educating students via survey. That whole idea of do no harm, that's a big one for me. And for many others, not just me. So I'm curious, why? How is that used? Is that tied to a grant? Is there funding actually coming related to that question? How do I teach differently based upon knowing somebody's interests in that way.
I'm trying to get to the exact question. It was in the Google Drive.
Yeah.
Materials that I sent to you, and because it is a choice option that we have as a district.
But it has been asked. It's not something that
Yes.
hasn't been asked.
Yes, I didn't do the history of that particular question. It's only been in the last 2-ish years that we've asked that question.
My son was in 6th grade when he was asked that question.
So how many years ago was that?
He's now a junior.
Okay, okay. My Google Drive's not pulling up right now, but anyways, yes, that is an option question.
6 or 7, excuse me.
Why do we choose to ask it? We choose to ask it because we know we do have a population, and yes, I think Joe kind of said like 5% of our population identifying the LGBTQ plus community. And we have, through our student work groups, town halls and things, it's a way to help validate. They talk to us all the time about how they're not represented in the curriculum, their voice is not represented in the things that we do, and looking for ways where they can be better represented. And by asking that question, it gives them an opportunity to say, yes, this is me. And this is how I feel about whatever the question is being asked, whether it be about college readiness, engagement, or whatever. But that is something that is optional for us as a district. We just have chosen to have that question be asked.
But there's other questions that let them identify that. How does that question, who they're romantically interested in, help the district?
I guess as you're speaking, sorry, I don't know. It kind of goes along with the question. Like, how far do we break that down? Because, I recall in school that, kids who may seem overweight got bullied horribly. Do we break it down to that? Because if we're focusing on, sexuality or maybe other traits, immutable traits, like skin color, sometimes wearing glasses isn't popular, being overweight isn't popular. Being in the special classes and being behind academically, like I was in school, wasn't very popular. How far do we break that down and kind of target these different groups that may be bullied a little more than others?
I don't have a specific question for that or answer for that.
I guess I'm curious if you've ever looked at overweight kids to see how they feel about how they're being treated at school.
Not in any surveys that I've seen us give.
I think what you get in surveys now is they're culturally driven.
We're kind of picking and choosing.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
And it's whatever the culture is at that time is what's
The,
being represented.
just so you know what the question is, do you consider yourself to be gay or lesbian, straight or heterosexual, bisexual, another identity not included above, I'm not sure, or I prefer not to say. That's that. And we can either have it or not have it on the survey.
And what grade level?
6 through 12.
So my concern is hyper focus on sexualization relative to the school. I don't think is actually super healthy. I know I may not be anyways, I'm just saying that personally. To follow up to that, if that question has to be asked, which I don't think it has to be based on funding and other things. And that was one of the questions that I know Nathan had asked of Tim was what specifically is tied to funding? What things do we have to do versus what things do we want to do? What's best practice, that kind of stuff. I think that's important. But a follow-up to that would be if it has to be asked, we need to go above and beyond with telling parents in the community what their kids are being asked. And I know that could be better as far as every resource possible to tell people what questions their kids are being asked, making it incredibly easy to access the material. I've been to go to Ryan's office to look at it, not necessarily the easiest way to access the material. Anyways, anybody else can speak. I don't mean to monopolize, but that's a big one for me. That's the only reason why I wanted to talk about Youth Truth Survey, to be honest.
I guess I kind of wonder, if you're, children are definitely open to suggestion and follow the lead of adults. And if you're a human being at any age that is able to express you're being bullied. I don't know, I guess I'd like to teach my kids. Don't worry about your sexuality, how are you being treated as a human being? And so I kind of, I wonder, and I know that's a social thing, everybody else has opinions on that, everybody has their own, but. Their voice is being heard if they're taking a survey and they have the ability to say they've been mistreated in any way, or feel like the teachers are giving them the attention they need, or some of the comments that. That I saw that I'm not being challenged enough, that sort of stuff, and then other people saying, well, I'm being challenged too much. It's really like, you go on a roller coaster ride, reading all the comments, but. I guess I would just argue from that philosophical point of view that if they are answering questions, they have a voice regardless of their skin color, their sexuality. And so I guess I wonder if it is controversial to so many parents, how detrimental would it be for the school to remove the sexuality stuff altogether? How badly would that affect ability to make decisions, inform policy or whatever else? Just a question.
One of the problems with the sexuality question that I see, and it gets back to what you were saying about you can be bullied for wearing glasses, you can be bullied for being overweight, you can be bullied for a myriad of reasons. You've got the male, female, and then the LGBTQ plus, and that's 5%. But they're not all the same thing. So now all of a sudden, each one is 0.25% or 1/3%. So what you're doing is you're really.
You mean of the overall population?
Of the overall population. So what you're doing is you're taking you're focusing on a very small population and excluding other types of bullying that you were talking about that can occur. I like the general question, are you bullied? And why? Not taking and putting a label, trying to find out what the label would be, but actually asking the question why. If it's anonymous, if it's an anonymous survey, the child should say, because I identify as such and such. If so, I think in the 6th grade, I'm thinking, that's pretty darn young for a child to even understand the complexity of that. But that's my opinion. I would rather know that a child is being bullied and let them explain why rather than.
I think it's interesting information for us to know that we have. It's 5% of our population identifies LGBTQ plus, but they feel like they're being bullied at a rate twice that of other students. It's important for us to be able to know that and to be able to support our students in that way. And if we completely eliminate the possibility of asking that, then we are just dealing with bullying, where we may need to be dealing with more specific bullying that's targeted at a group.
So that's a great point. So are we asking questions about if the kids are overweight? And if we do, are they bullied at 3 times the rate as the other kids? In which case that would be more concern to us than the LGBTQ plus kids. But if we
Especially with the level of obesity.
Well, I mean, if we want to be, if we really want to be effective, we got to have more information. If you're trying to help certain groups, it seems like there ought to be a broader look. And I mean, I don't want to see anybody bullied. There's nothing more horrible than seeing a child's self-esteem hurt for them, feel that they can't learn. They're in a learning environment and they don't want to go to school. I mean, that's a horrible thing. Especially with somebody you love and know, your kids or your nephews and nieces. Or if it's happened to you, it's not a good thing. But I guess I guess the question is when you start picking and choosing certain populations to look at, you can really broaden that out. If you really want to be accurate and comprehensive about it, there's other categories that could be focused on. And if we're not doing it, and we're picking and choosing and we're narrowing our ability to really help kids that might be in need. economic status, kids that come from poor families and their shoes aren't as nice or their clothes aren't as nice. That's a big one as well. So I think it's a lot broader. I think it's a lot broader than that. And so, either we do more of that and find more subgroups of people who might be subject to bullying, or we go to just you're a human and being bullied, we'll try to help you. And bullying across the board, not okay. We got to stop doing it.
This is the reason why I would prefer a generic question where you ask the child why they are being bullied. Rather than give them a label with them.
What I'm trying to get into is the youth truth, because some of the things you're saying are in the youth
Right.
truth data.
Yes.
I think what, and I just added sending an email to Youth Truth to ask a few more questions about the sexual orientation. Just to make sure I understand how the data is disaggregated and stuff. So if we can report back to you on that particular piece. If that's the only concern on the survey, we can dig into that a little bit deeper.
By far my biggest concern. I'd also like to know the cost since we pay for this and we don't potentially pay for other surveys. So that'd be great information to have.
Yeah, I can answer that. It's about $20,000 to get the youth truth survey.
Per year, we pay 20,000 for the survey.
What's your elementary cost? 7,000 for secondary, but then I think it's.
I guess I was just, the last thing I would say is that to me, it's an obvious thing. But I'm sure there's other viewpoints on it, but we talk a lot about being inclusive. And one of the follies is that in our attempts often to be inclusive, the minute you start picking and choosing certain groups over others, you're immediately becoming exclusive. And so if there are kids that are getting bullied incessantly because of their weight or any other matter, their socioeconomic status, and they see other kids getting preference and them getting targeted with words of affirmation and words of love, and they're sitting there thinking, well, why aren't I? Well, son, because you weren't one of those special groups, and then it becomes exclusive. And so we have to be very careful when we're doing that sort of thing. And I don't think we look at that hard enough.
There's also a number of information out there saying that essentially pretty kids get better grades. We aren't trying to do anything about that, but it's a thing. So the antithesis to that is if you're not a pretty kid, you may get bullied and your grades are worse. And do we do anything about that as a district?
It seems to me that if we know that the LGBTQS plus population is being bullied at twice the rate of the regular population, and that we know that that subgroup is also, I don't know the percentage of, but more vulnerable to thoughts of suicide and self-harm, that any kind of information we can gather to be in a position to affirm them as people and of worth, and that they matter also, is a step against the situation that has been a problem for too many decades, leading to actual beyond bullying, deaths and murders. I think we have to use all the tools we can to make that inclusion and make that, affirmation of humanity available to everyone.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that. Other than, I think the principle holds true. That if you are. I guess one question I would ask is, as well is, do we really, how well do we know? That the bullying is more than anybody else, if there, surveys are interesting, but we don't know. It's the best data you got. You kind of count on that, but there's also pretty interesting research, like the SCAR research about, people that were given a fake scar. They're supposed to go into a group of others to talk to them, but they didn't know that the scar was removed before they went in, so they had no scar. But after they talked to the groups of people, they came back and reported that they were being discriminated against based on the scar that didn't exist. And which implies that, sometimes a lot of our perceptions of what we're experiencing is subjective. So there's a lot of interesting studies and data that needs to be looked at to really determine if that's true. I don't doubt that it may be. But in our attempt to be inclusive, when you start picking out certain people or certain groups, you are immediately becoming exclusive. So there's got to be a smarter way and a better way to do that. And that's really all I'm saying. But I don't disagree. I don't want to see anybody bullied at all.
Right.
And we need to see everybody's humanity. It's very important. I come from a very large family. We have every which kind of person you can imagine. And those of you who know my family know that. But anyway.
I'll just reiterate that I don't think sexuality has to be a part of this survey.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I'll just reiterate that I don't think sexuality has to be a part of this survey. Doesn't need to be a part of what we're doing as far as teaching math. Doesn't need to be a part of what we're doing with teaching English. I do agree that it becomes inclusive and then exclusive to other things. I'm not suggesting that we remove questions about transgenderism, homosexuality, etc., but include questions about heterosexuality. I'm just suggesting sexuality in general shouldn't be a question on the survey.
Well, I just think it might be a tool that would be helpful. And I don't want to go backwards on having less tools instead of more. I don't disagree that we need more tools and more information.
Retool the tool.
Any more questions for Trish?
Definitely gonna say, especially at sixth grade. I don't know, maybe there's some kids in sixth grade. If sexuality is the thing. It has been a while since it was in sixth grade. It really wasn't a thing. You'd ask me, who knows what kind of answer you would have got. I really didn't know anything about it. At sixth grade, it seems to be.
We also have to recognize popular culture dictates answers. Especially with the young and impressionable.
This makes a big impression on the kids.
Mm.
This makes a huge impression on
Yeah.
our kids.
Yeah.
Every sixth grader has one.
Every second grader has one.
But I think the idea of I commend Trish, first of all, for the
Yeah.
presentation, but also. The surveys are incredibly important. School culture is incredibly important. If you're gonna run a school, you better understand your school culture if you're gonna help children, keep them safe and keep them moving forward in their lives.
We will work on what you've shared with us, all of you. And report back at a later date before we give the test or the survey. But we will make sure that we get you additional information as we go forward. And you heard Trish saying she's emailing the group.
Yep.
Right now.
Yep.
So.
Thanks,
Yep.
Trish.
And along those lines, Trish, can you include the information on grants and funding and like what actually has to be? Thank you. Appreciate that. All of you.
You got
All right, 7.5 pronouns. We have 7.5.1 supporting under students. 7.5.2 student support safety plan templates. 7.5 create administrative memo. Is that you?
Handing it off to Danny.
All
right. Yes, and I don't know nearly as much about pronouns as Trish knows about the Nutrition survey. We will give it a shot. So first I want to talk to you about what is in your packet. I don't really know, the topic came up, I don't know what all the questions will be. It's very likely that when we get questions, I will take them down, get back with legal counsel because they're really the ones that we rely on for expertise. And I can kind of explain a little bit about why that is. So what you have in your packet, though, let's start with that. The first thing I think you had in the packet is the information from the Oregon Department of Education. So you've got this is their most up-to-date guidance that they released in January of 2023. Supporting gender expansive students guidance for schools. The other piece there that you have is the student support and safety plan. And then the last thing that you have is administrative memo. So what in the heck is the administrative memo and why is it there? So I'm going to backpedal a little bit. So we do a lot of administrative memos, a lot of administrative cheat sheets for that the district office helps generate because administrators have questions for us about how do we proceed in this particular area. So for an example, we have a policy that is policy GCN, GDN. You don't need to write it down, you just need to know that it's teacher evaluation. And the State Department gives some things that are supposed to happen with teacher evaluation. That policy gives some things that are supposed to happen with teacher evaluation. And administrators say, what are we supposed to do with teacher evaluation? So we create cheat sheets that as the cheat sheet for this is how we deal with teacher evaluation. Okay. We have complaint procedures in our policy book. 4 policies: KL, public complaints; AC, discrimination complaints; JBA, Title IX complaints; ACB, bias complaints. We have a complaint process in the certified contract. We have a complaint process in the classified contract. So we have a lot of complaint processes. And so administrators go, so when we get a complaint, what are we supposed to do with that? So we create a cheat sheet that says, this is how you handle complaint processes. Somebody says, how do I get into GPAS? Well, we have a process administratively we give out. How do I register for the GED? We have a process that we give out and we revise those on a pretty much annual basis as things come up, things change, so forth and so on. One that's been totally revised, and I don't have it because it's Vanessa's world, is there used to be a process for special education, how you would do a partial day in special education. Legislature passed new laws that said you can do it, but your old process doesn't work. You've got to follow all these different things that are now outlined in the legislative laws. And so we created a new cheat sheet about how to do partial days. That's what the administrative memo is around transgender identity, pronoun guidance, and that kind of stuff. It is trying to take those things that are laws, those things that are guidance from ODE, and to try to give administrators some general direction about how do we handle these things when they come up. The big umbrella that's on top of all of that are policies that are based on state and federal laws. So our policy AC, our policy ACB, so AC is our anti-discrimination policy, ACB is our every student belongs policy. They're very clear. We will not discriminate against students. And one of the things that will not discriminate against students for is race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex. There's a list of things that we will, by state law, by federal law, not discriminate against students based on. And so that's kind of the umbrella of all of that stuff. So what we did with the administrative memo was we're not smart enough to look at all that and figure it all out without having our attorneys look at it. And even in the guidance from ODE, there's a sentence that says, this guidance is not legal advice, nor should it be relied on as legal advice. If you require legal advice regarding these issues in this guidance, please consult an attorney. And you can find that on page 4, 5, 6. So that's what we did. We had both Rebecca Jacobson from GHR, who I think did some work with the board earlier. And then we had Bill Ransom do some work and try to create general guidance for how we respond to different circumstances. For us, two really, really huge things. Number one, we want to make sure that every student, we don't care, heavy glasses like us, you know, different gender identity, boy, girl, every student should be welcome in our schools, period. That is an overarching theme. The second one is when there are things that come up about gender identity and those types of things, our number one goal all the way back since 2015, our kind of go-to place has always been, it's an individual thing. And administrators, parents, we really hope parents, students, and then coming up with the district office, that kind of thing, but really administrators and parents, counselors, make a plan that fits that particular situation to the best of our absolute ability. And so they always try to do that. So those two things are at the heart of the guidance. From there, it's just kind of in general, this is what happens when a parent knows about the gender choice, how we deal with that. This is an option when parents don't know about the gender choice and how we deal with that. What do we do with pronouns, those types of things. And we've had an administrative memo in place going back all the way to 2015. And there have been adjustments as laws change, as guidance changes, as court cases come out, because what happens in the courts will change how we're supposed to react and that kind of stuff. So this particular one has been reviewed, has been written by both of our attorneys. What's different about this, just to be completely transparent and blunt, than ones that we've had in the past, there's a couple of things three things I think that are different. One of the things is it used to say that it's recommended that a student's assertion of his or her own gender identity be recognized by district employees. Now it says that they must recognize the assertion of the gender identity. So that's a change.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, so it used to say that it's recommended that employees recognize the assertion of the gender identity. Now, with all the things that have happened with laws and guidance and stuff, it's a must accept a student's assertion of his or their gender identity.
And so that says revised August 18.
Yeah.
This year, what was the previous revision date?
May 5th, 2020, May 5th, 2016. So that in number 3, that section that says must accept, that's a revision.
And it was revised due to case laws that have come up.
Along with that, though, if you scroll up, whoever's driving that ship.
The drum set, or
How far you want to go in?
Right to the-
Right there.
right.
So that part at the bottom of the section that's bold, that says if a staff member asserts a religious objection to using a student's preferred name or pronoun, please refer the staff member to human resources to go through an accommodation process. That part is also new. So you've got those two things that are new. One is that, yes, you have to accept it. If you have religious objections, then legal counsel's guidance is that you go to HR and you go through an accommodation process. It's so new, we have not done one of those. So I have not done that. Ryan will get to walk people through that if we have that with legal counsel's help. Obviously, I believe And I'm gonna say, I believe, and I will double check with, legal counsel, neither one of them could be here tonight, so. I guess I'm as good as you get. That is in that tension between, First Amendment rights of, I'm gonna say forced speech, compelled speech, versus, students' rights. And so that's where that, going through that accommodation process has come about. And I believe that's based on case law, that, was found through
A follow-up on that.
GHR.
In the summertime, you had, and I don't know if it was July or August, we had Rebecca Jacobson here. And she sent an email that I forwarded to you. And that does address in there the First Amendment compelled speech. So you can go back and read that. That's still current at this time. Sorry.
No, that's good. Appreciate it. So,
Danny, can I ask a question real quick?
absolutely.
Can we get the third one? I'm just
Okay,
writing the
sorry.
list here.
Okay.
Of the changes?
Yeah, you said there was 3.
So scroll down some more.
Hold that thought.
So this is, stop right there and we'll continue on. So the stuff that's bold on this is a change. And I can tell you that a little bit where this comes from is if you look at the ODE guidance, there's no provision for age. It's just if a student has a gender assertion at any age, the recommendation through ODE is that you accept that assertion. So that can be K through 12. Okay. And so working with legal counsel, one of the questions is, well, that part's, so scroll on up. If we could.
Back up to 3.
No, down, my bad. Yeah. So right there. So there's a bit of a tension between that advice and a parent's constitutional right to guide their student. And so where does that land between the tension of those two things? And so working with legal counsel, it's kind of a continuum that we look at. And this would not be a decision that would be made without consulting legal counsel and that kind of stuff. So for younger students, elementary age, the right of the parent to access student records and the constitutional right to direct the upbringing of the child will carry heavy weight in any decisions. Balanced with the safety and risk or threat could outweigh parent guardian risk. That also means if there's something that threatening, it could potentially trigger a DHS or law enforcement report. So younger, more balanced toward the constitutional right of a parent to guide the upbringing of the student as they begin to get into middle school, older into high school, and then when they're 18, it's all them. That begins to shift a little bit more toward the student rights. And so that's the legal advice that we got on how do you handle that conundrum. And so that's a change from what we've had in previous years. So those are the 3 changes, Dustin.
Go ahead, Joe.
Those aren't since this, right? Those are all in the January 5th.
That is not in January 5th. That is our district. Like I said, that said, consult your legal advice. We consulted legal advice, and that's what happened with our legal advice. And I would say that we worked on that most of the spring last year, working back and forth primarily with Bill Ransom's office. And so then as questions ultimately are going to come up and people need advice, administrators need advice, we put that into the administrative memo with the blessing of both Bill Ransom and Rebecca Jacobson.
So I wanted to follow up because I received a question from a board member last night. What is the difference between guidance and law, as well as mandates? Mandates carry the weight of law, which was what happened with the mask mandate, as we recall. Guidance is a representation of how ODE would come down on a decision of whether or not the district violated Oregon's non-discrimination education laws. So as you know, we make a decision at the school level, a parent can eventually appeal to the board. If the board made the decision that was not favorable in the case to a parent in this situation, they could then appeal to Oregon Department of Ed. And Oregon Department of Ed would say, did you follow this? And if you did not, then you would lose and they would mandate that you followed that. So they're telling you what they would do if it came to them. That's the rules they're gonna follow. And so how often does it go to ODE? Not very, but it does from time to time. Across the state, go there. And if it ended up in the courts would say, did you follow this? You were given the guidance, did you follow it? And if you didn't, you'd be found in violation. So having said that, our attorneys have given us a little wiggle room within the guidance provided by the state of Oregon.
Really appreciate all the context. One more minor thing, just for context, what's the difference between the use of administrative memo versus like an AR that we were looking at last week in the policy meeting that's just kind of directly coming from policy? They kind of both, they synonymous,
Can I pull it,
administrative rules.
can I pull it, Gary?
Yeah.
24 hours.
One time. It's the cutting off the ends of the ham. I go, what does that mean? So the very first time grandma cooked an Easter ham, grandpa bought a ham too big for the pan, so she cut the two ends off of it so it would fit in the pan. So for the next 100 years, because grandma cut the ends of the ham off, every year that they cook a ham, they cut the ends of the ham off of it, because that's what you did.
Okay.
So when this first came out, it
What'd you
was
do?
called an administrative memorandum.
Gotcha.
When this first came out, it was called Human Resources Department Complaint Process. This was called Cliff Notes. And so because we've always called it an administrative memorandum, we continue to call it an administrative memorandum.
I'll take it as synonymous. Then, yeah.
Why is it?
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks,
Thanks, Gary,
Thanks,
for
Gary.
that.
Gee,
Actually, I like that.
well done.
Prepare to hear it.
We do listen, Gary.
It is a living, breathing document. I will tell you that when you talk to Rebecca Jacobson, the main point is it's all individual. The big words are, it depends. What are the circumstances around any of these particular situations? And this will change. We know this will change as more court cases go through the system, as more court cases go through the Ninth Circuit. As I'm assuming eventually a court will go from the Oregon to the Ninth to the Supreme Court. I don't believe that's happened. There are actually, from what I've seen, very, very few cases that are Oregon law to Ninth Circuit law. There's others in other regions, but there's very few that would be considered binding cases that have gone through the Oregon law process. That will happen, and this will have to be updated. Uh-oh, all right.
Well, I was just thinking on, what is that, D, number 5?
Yeah.
You get the word, which may also, and I think it should just say, which shall then. And that way, from the district perspective, the parents are informed unless it rises to the level that it needs to be reported to DHS or law enforcement, in which case, that's what we do.
We'll take that under advisement. Great idea.
So Gary, just to clarify, if parents aren't informed, then DHS will be contacted. So if we're not gonna give parents their rights, it's because we're concerned for the child and we are reporting to DHS. It's not a squishy.
In other words, you know that child is in danger. And if you know that, you should be reporting to DHS.
Because we're protecting
It's
the
not
kids no
just
matter
you
what.
think you might, because it's a big decision between parents' rights and taking away parents' rights. They're, to be able to influence their child's development and struggles or sexuality, whatever it is. That's a pretty big deal.
Does that in any way take away from the legal advice that's been received thus far?
We'll run it by council. And ask them.
For whatever it's worth, I kind of put that note in there too. I know it's a big deal, but it kind of hit me the same way that if we're not going to inform parents, then it must really be a serious thing. So then probably should be
Correct.
going to that level.
Either one or the other.
But please, hear clearly, we strive
Yeah.
every single
Sure.
time.
Yeah,
To involve parents, which is not what you read in here. Right?
There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
I have a question about one of just the language.
Sure.
I've got several questions, but I'll just start with this one. Because I think something like this is totally necessary. We want to do the best we can to interpret, because we have teachers, we have parents, and we have students who need to know the rules, I guess, right? And even when you were mentioning some of the information we have from council, there's kind of a characterization of, probably didn't say this, but it's kind of uncharted waters in a lot of these areas, right? Like
Correct.
some cases are still pending and a lot of stuff like that. On what do the courts say? So I think we should strive to be specific. And on section 4, it says this, at the end of the second line, district employees should be careful to balance the safety and concern for the well-being of the student with the district's obligation to maintain accurate educational records. I think the word balance needs more definition or clarity. I think it's pretty like I was trying to look at that as a district employee and what does that mean? And so then it kind of puts that weight of do you lie to the parent in a parent teacher conference or not? And then if you do or don't, where do you land?
Where are you finding that, Dustin? I'm
What's
sorry.
that second, into the second line of item 4? The word balance.
Yes.
And maybe it's more than just the word. I just felt like I'm trying to think of situations where in that case, you're being asked to hide information from parents, I think. I believe that's what it's saying. So if you're in like a parent, student, teacher environment, and then you're aware of this, but then you aren't able to use certain pronouns and because of this issue, it could put a teacher in a very difficult position on what exactly are we telling them to do when we say balance,
That makes sense.
right? Versus just trying to avoid putting them in that position.
We don't want the case where the parent comes to some kind of conference at the school. And because we haven't involved the parent and we haven't thought it was a big enough deal to go to DHS, that because of the child's request to the school district represents essentially lies to the parent. We don't want to be in that position. I believe that's occurred a couple times. And we don't want to be in that position. We never want to be able to ask any of our staff to essentially lie to a parent because of the way we've implemented our policy stuff.
Interpreted.
And kind of like you were saying in the previous subject, it does make me think, are there other instances where we do this? Are there other? I mean, I'd be curious to know if there's other areas where we're asking teachers to, and again, it may just require more definition of this, but balance that confidentiality or that identity or the use of pronouns, I think might be the specific thing we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There are other areas we're already doing this and where it's appropriate, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting, their actual guidance, Oregon laws on school harassment, intimidation, and bullying require schools to adopt policies on parental notification when a student either experiences or commits an act of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. And you have Oregon law that says the parents will be notified anytime there's any kind of harassment, bullying, or intimidation.
So,
So there's gonna be issues with that, which come into conflict with just possible the students saying, I wanna be a different gender at school, but I don't wanna tell my parents yet. Really don't want the district to have to be in that position. Then if the child is bullied, we got requirements to tell the parents.
But you
But
can't say
we
why.
also say we don't wanna tell the parents, and it just puts us in a terrible place.
yeah, welcome to our world.
Yeah,
And that's why I think, Gary, it's, that's that individual
mhm,
case situation, and I think part of that balance in there is when it talks about records and that kind of stuff is if a student really is gonna do a formal name change process and that kind of stuff, that becomes a student record, and parents have the ability to request student records and they will get that information. We have told staff, I think, pretty sure you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, part of the verbal thing to administrators when we met about this, it wasn't just about this, but at one of our meetings is we will not lie to parents. If a parent asks us, is my son asking to be called Alex? We will not say, no, your son's not asking to be called Alex. We will tell the parent the truth. Yes, your son is asking to be called Alex. Our goal is not to deceive parents or not to keep the information from the parents. Our goal may be, we're going to wait at the student's request, but we're going to have counselors working really hard to get the student in a place where they can have that conversation with their parent, because sometimes they're really hard conversations. And we will even sit with you and we'll help you have that conversation, you know. And we try to use the example, you know, if you go into the store and they call me Chad at the store, right? And I say to your mom says, wait a minute, your name's Jane. Oh, just a silly thing that happens. Well, that happens 5 or 6 times. Parents are going to go, come on, man, why are they calling you Chad? You know, so eventually these things, they're going to come out, and it's better to have those conversations beforehand and with some help and that kind of stuff. And that's ultimately the goal of what we're trying to do. And I think our counselors work really, really hard at trying to have that happen.
And wasn't I told at one point that the counselors tell students who want to keep secrets from their parents that that is impossible, that their parents will find out. It is inevitable. So let's plan how to make it as painless as possible.
Me too.
That's good advice. Gives the kids a heads up. It's not, you know, things don't stay in the dark forever, one way or another. If things get found out. I guess I would just say that so the issue of course, belonging and, you know, kids who might be dealing with, gender dysphoria or confusion about their sexuality is a pretty serious thing. And it's important that we get it right. And that's why I wish the ODE hadn't dropped this pile of garbage on you and us to have to try to reference as if it is the best solution to dealing with this issue. And I say that because as I read through this back in January, it's full of pseudoscience. And frankly, there's some things in here that aren't even rational. And it sounds like it got handed to a zealous college student to write it in some cases. And I know those are strong words, but we want to get it right with these kids to help them out. Most of them are dealing with comorbidities, mental health or other issues. There's a lot that goes into what they're dealing with. And some of what's in here is not just misguided, and there is research evidence that some of the things that are being suggested in this are actually harmful or can be harmful. And so you've been handed and we've been handed and the parents have been handed, and unfortunately the kids that could be harmed by it have been handed a pile of garbage, in my opinion, and I'm okay to say that publicly. And for that reason, I hope we can do our best. Obviously, you guys are doing your best to make this a good local solution. I brought the reference and I asked that this be put in the meeting minutes. This is a stack of research summaries from an organization called GenSpect. And they are a very good fact-based, research-based organization. They are nonpartisan. But they focus on issues of gender. And so there are studies and data and information on here that talk about everything you can imagine that goes along with the mental health, with the sexual health of kids that might be going through this. Demographics, the efficacy of some of these suggested treatments, how well they work, how well they might not work, some of the harm they might be causing. And so I wanted to provide this as a reference, and I hope we would take a look at that. And if there are things that legally we obviously cannot do, fine, we have to live with that. If there's wiggle room, and if we have discretion, then we should do the best we can to make a local solution that makes more sense than this pile of political garbage that was thrown down on us. And there is some good things in here. I'm not trying to, tear apart the whole thing. There are some good things in here, but there's a lot that's not, that's actually not helpful. So I appreciate your guys' efforts. And I hope we can, where we have the ability to have better solutions. The main goal is what's best for the kids. That's really what it comes down to. And if there's good data and research that suggests some of these practices aren't good for kids, I hope we would take that into consideration.
Just to follow up, he only brought one copy. So we're not
I could
handing
bring
it
more.
out. No, you don't have to. Tanya will be gone Thursday
make
and
copies.
Friday. And so she'll get you this information out next week.
I'd love to see that.
Okay, but it is just one packet. It's not.
And there's lots of different resources as well, but I guess what I'm saying, I have used strong words and kind of beat up on this. I don't think this was comprehensive. Because when you look at research and data that's been done by a lot of groups, you don't see it implemented in this or integrated into this. And so it's a very complicated issue, and there, frankly, some of the stuff that's in here is simplistic and not very rational, and frankly against some of the science, and it is pseudoscience, and I mean that seriously with some of the stuff that's in here. So with that, I'm gonna stop talking about it.
Well, so I'll add information there that we haven't seen. If this was modified such that the district either informs the parents or reports to DHS, our attorneys look to me like we would still be in a legally safe place. Essentially, our policy would require district personnel to notify parents if kids were doing this kind of stuff if it wasn't to the level that needed to be reported somewhere else. Does that go against?
We're gonna find out.
In there?
We're gonna,
I think the age might, I think the younger age is probably, I'm not gonna speak, I'm gonna ask the question. Yeah, but I don't know about the older students versus younger students, but I will ask that question.
and we'll get a better definition on balance.
Yeah, and I know you had other questions, so I don't wanna, we'll come back to you and.
I do.
Help me
I do.
ask some better questions about the other languages.
I'm patient though, so, yeah. Maybe I'll start with a comment though, as a transition. I have heard in the past that this memo was not necessarily like widely dispersed and available, and that's our policy and that sort of thing. And I am not sure if that's also currently the case. In terms of transparency, I mean, we're having this meeting today. You could give a great context about where it comes from, especially when you add in what you said, Superintendent Sweeney, that it's from non-discrimination education laws that ODE has published guidance. a different G word, that they think we should adopt or maybe take our own, attorney advice and present. So I think with that context, I think we should be completely transparent, and it should be available. As this is what we're doing, this is how we do it, and not be limited. So that's a comment about how I think the information should be put out there. Not that it's somehow was a controversial subject, so let's kind of only share it with a few people. Because I think you're doing a great job. This is great. Take a big document here and a lot of laws and everything else, and try to kind of get it down. And that's why I'm saying I think the more specific, the better. I know it's hard, but another question was on at the end of section 3, where you do have a bold section for staff that asserts a religious objection. Question about students. So I know part of this is educating their peers, but again, when it comes down to, I guess, compelled speech and that sort of thing, I know it's super difficult to talk about this, but should we insert language that deals with students who, I guess at that point, they would need accommodations? I don't know if that's the terminology there. So that's a question. It doesn't have to be answered right now, but just maybe should we be dealing with that situation as well? I'm just thinking about this situationally.
Is that under that intimidation bullying policy?
Yeah, we'll ask that question.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, I don't expect the director.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that one off the top of my head, so.
And Bill Ransom wanted no part of this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He ran out of here. Yeah. I can keep going. Maybe one more, maybe more. I don't know.
Go.
Again, doesn't require an answer. Very end, item 6. It could the last sentence saying absent circumstances that pose a risk to the safety of students, the district shall not prohibit students from accessing restrooms, locker rooms, or other facilities which may be separated by gender. That are associated with students' preferred gender identity. I'm wondering if we need to go situationally and be more specific on the definition of safety of students and where we think that could pose a safety concern. So it's a question. We don't necessarily need to talk about it, but again, it gets into, the big questions are obviously, if somebody identifies as female and has access to female locker rooms, is that posing a safety risk to the women or the girls or the women in that locker? And if you surveyed this room, you'd probably have, I don't know, 50-50 split on that answer. I don't know, so then who's making that decision? Should we be more specific in these items? And I know sometimes that it's tough to get specific, but that's where these things go. So.
And the answer to not the restroom question, but the specificity question sometimes is because they're so situational, the more specific you get, the less ability you have to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Okay.
So. Very few seem to be cut and dry.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I noted there, I don't know. Again, I don't know all the legal ramifications, but it does say safety, but I wonder if there's a psychological harm or risk component too. That is allowed to be used in that language.
I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so important for us to do the bathrooms and facilities that give students more choice.
Yeah.
That there's
You're right.
more options where people can go in places where they feel safe and regardless.
Yep.
So. Yes, we'll ask those questions.
Maybe final question.
All right, go for it.
Can we either eliminate the uncertainty or clarify in section 4B. Third to last line at the very end, it says to the extent that they are documented. So it's talking about a student wishes to change their gender and or pronoun. To the extent they are documented, could be considered educational records that the parent is entitled to inspect under FERPA. So same sort of issue. I know it's providing the leeway there, but not understanding situationally what the trigger would be to document versus not document something. And that probably goes back again to, and I don't know how much of that would fall on an individual teacher or somebody who's going to wonder, I know that there'd probably be a lot of communication with administration, but wanting to know, like, is this, I should be documenting this, but I'm being told not to, or whatever, just not wanting to put teachers in that tough position or staff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, who put the word could? I mean, those are educational records, so why is there any ambiguity?
My guess is that you have, there is some privacy in sometimes when there's counseling things that are done. So if student counselor have conversations, those may not be accessible educational records. Administrator puts it into log notes, it would be an educational record.
That's in classroom or school. So, I mean, yeah, counselors have their own special set of laws. So I suppose the kid could do that with the counselor.
Yeah.
But nobody else.
Correct.
And that's covered by law. But if they do it anywhere else, that's part of the educational record.
Sometimes kids get nicknames and it's a fun one that they accept, not a bullying device. And I can see a class and a teacher calling a kid by a nickname and not meaning it as a change of gender or as a change of legal name, just a nickname.
Yeah, I worked
And
with
so,
South for
so that wouldn't be in the school record either.
Yeah, my son Karis ended up Ari for about 16 years.
It's a
You got
far
more?
cry from when my father-in-law was in a class with 4 Johns and the teacher looked at him and said, "You are Jack."
Did you find another one?
I do, yeah, just a big picture question. Does anybody know what these flags represent on the cover of the
No,
ODE
some of them.
document that we're,
I think the one with the feathers is a two-spirit flag. One of them is, but I'll find it out.
yeah, just be
Just
interested,
in case of curiosity.
what we're,
Wait, Gary's got answers.
Yeah, you're always gonna know.
well, first of all, it sounds like there's each one of them has an actual,
Oh, yeah.
they're not just artwork or whatever. Okay, got it.
Specific.
So what did you learn, Gary?
Oh, boy, a test. Far left was two-spirit. I don't know. Why don't you just help me out?
That, like, I believe this is the asexual flag, this is the transgender flag. And then these are the 3 that I always mixed up, but one of them is non-binary, and one of them is gender fluid, and then I'm not sure what they're.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I went to one workshop where they said, people have been trying to box people into an either or maybe something in the middle. But it's actually a continuum of infinity. And that's why we keep getting more initials on the.
Which is why I'm glad they put the plus.
What's that?
I'm glad they put the plus at the end.
Just to capture everything. that might come.
After.
So just for my own sake, and Tanya, you double check me here. So I have number 3. Should that last thing, is there anything with students that goes along with that? Section 4, the first sentence there, to be careful to balance some more wordsmithing about what does that mean? Just more clarity. Right?
Clarity, yeah.
The big one that everybody put down was if, especially at the younger ages, we're not going to notify parents, then shall trigger other potentials rather than may. Which may? I feel like it should be an either or. More clarity on documented, what's documented, what does that mean? What should be documented, those types of things, right? Yep. And then the last one I have is the safety. What falls into safety, and is there any more clarity that could be provided, or do we get ourselves in trouble by providing more clarity?
Mhm. And also maybe is psychological harm a thing? Be weighed.
I get them, and then what are the flags?
And we got the answer to that for the most part, thank you.
Yeah, survey next meeting. Test.
Doesn't you guys all have to say something about those decisions? It's not gonna be a voice, but I was like,
Do you need a person? I'm doing it.
it's one of that had to stand by.
I'm not sure which section that went with, but
It was down in the 6th, number 6.
It's a team effort. I think when we get things, principals typically will bring it to either Susan or to Trish or to myself, and it will be a huddle with all of the people named, plus Ryan, and obviously plus Tim and maybe Tommy, if the facilities are involved and all those kinds of things. And then it's taking, okay, what questions do we have? Let's take those questions to legal counsel. We get information from legal counsel, and then we give that information back to the principal. So that would be a typical process on how one of those decisions would be made.
thank you for bringing that up. I would bullet that, and then maybe that's the answer, and that's the clarity and the transparency that would be good for everybody to know when it comes to defining the safety of students. It would be by that process,
Yeah,
something like that.
this document on the website.
It is not.
I just want to quickly say thank you to all of the admin and directors that have put work into this. Thank you very much. This whole evening.
No small task.
Yeah.
I got off easy. Joe didn't hear about it, so I didn't have to talk.
We'll be talking next time. We appreciate the transparency and the clarity and understanding, especially for the other part of the board, the new part.
Yep.
of the board. The other. Is there any other questions or clarifications?
I always want to highlight parents' rights, like as much as we as much as we legally can. Make this all about parents. Yes, I know students have rights, but they are under their parents and their guardians, and so that's super important. 14th Amendment, First Amendment hit hard on this. We are bound by our oath as school board members to abide by the Constitution, which includes the amendments. This is guidance. I heard what Tim said, but this is guidance, and it's incredibly concerning if you actually read through all of it. To somebody else's point earlier, I would suggest that the research is pretty flawed. Let's take that with the grain of salt that it is and adjust things as much as we can. Thank you all for everything that you did on this. I know this is a hard topic, all the things we talked about tonight, but yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, Danny.
Can I
You're welcome.
echo, thank you for helping us navigate through. It's a sticky issue. Obviously, I'm not a fan of the guidance we've been given, but with what is being drafted up, I feel confident that there's a lot of thought and care is going into it to help us navigate through it and try to come up with the best way to handle kids that are very vulnerable in that state. So, thanks.
I need to come up with some kind of way to push back on ODE.
Ready, set, go.
For another
Gary.
workshop.
We're gonna stop there. Because this is recorded. You can call their document garbage.
I don't take back a word I said.
I didn't ask you to. I don't wanna push you back.
So are there any other board reports and special concerns? Good night, ladies. Thank you for joining.
I just thought I would mention, at the last meeting, it was asked, if we go to other school districts to get best practices, and I mentioned that yes, we do, and also other districts come to us. And I have a little folder here from the Soren, which is the Southern Oregon Regional Educator Network Partner School Tour that a couple of the region middle schools came to Redwood to talk about sound discipline demonstration school pilot program that we're doing. And so that's the latest one I know of, which doesn't mean it's the last one that's been here. But anyway, the answer is yes. And I think it really was a question on best practices. Where do we get best practices? And we have workshops, we have conventions, we have expanded personal or professional development. AVID was a huge program that first this group came to, and then the next group went to, and the next group, and it's starting to really permeate the entire district for us. There have been book clubs at different schools and district wide. I think of the Carol Dweck book on child development, and most recently the Brandon Fleming, who was the speaker at the back to school night, had a book, Miseducated, and several administrators and board members read that book. And then, of course, there's state garbage, as it may seem to some, and national guidelines that are all in the mix for best practices. And it's a constant process of discovering and implementing and moving forward.
Can I just say, I predict eventually this guidance will catch up to the latest science of what Europe is already changing with what they're calling gender affirming care. So that's my main objection, is that it's outdated. It could be better. And so we're left dealing with something that's not great guidance. That's all. I shouldn't have said garbage, maybe.
You're fine. Too late. You got
That's how you really feel.
And if you thought tonight was fun, let's just do it again in 4 more nights, 5 nights, Tuesday night, right?
It's not gonna be heavy, right? See you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.
Oh,
No, this was a heavy lift tonight. We got
I
into some
appreciate that.
deep conversations and gave the board opportunity to ask questions and learn more about what the work that we do. We're happy to do that.
Don't you hammer that thing yet.
Wait,
I just wanted to say we might want to talk about other alternatives to other resources in the future on a number of different levels. The CSBO is on my radar, is something I'm very interested in. I thought the board might want to talk about that, Community School Boards of Oregon, at some point in time. I'm very curious with some of the information we're getting council wise. And so anyways, I just think resources that are giving us information, we may want to talk about that in the future. That's it. I'm not trying to open this up to a long discussion, just
anybody
that
else?
out there.
Right.
And I have.
Nope.
Gavel down.